Under the wide Yorkshire sky, Emily Brontë could stand apart from human noise, with the moors spreading around Haworth in every quiet direction. The wind moved over the grass, stones held the warmth of day, and her steps carried her away from the close walls of the parsonage. In the 1840s, this open ground began only a short walk from home, yet it offered a world measured by weather, distance, and changing light. She could not solve every pain by walking. The deaths of her mother, Maria, and Elizabeth, the pressures of family life, and the isolation of Haworth remained waiting indoors. But she could keep moving until the wind filled her ears, the rough ground held her feet, and the wide land gave her mind room to rest. The walk created no miracle. It created a pause. The moors offered distance from crowded thought. Their steady shape gave her attention something firm to hold, the rise of a ridge, the dark line of a stone wall, the familiar path leading beyond the churchyard. Unlike human conflict, the landscape did not demand interpretation or reply. It remained present through ordinary repetition, and that constancy could make an unsettled mind feel briefly anchored. First, the mind could settle on the hills, the grass, and the sky. Then, in that small calm, a little space could open for feeling and for poetry. A cloud crossing the horizon, a gust bending the heather, or the sound of boots on wet earth could draw attention away from inward confusion. Stillness did not mean emptiness. It meant that experience could be noticed before it was judged. This need for quiet was not a love of pretty views alone. It was more like setting down a heavy bag after a long day. The relief came from the change in pressure, fewer voices, fewer duties, fewer social expectations, and no immediate need to perform a role. Nature offered conditions in which the body could tire honestly, while the mind stopped carrying every burden at once. Many people know that feeling. A room can grow full of noise, work, and worry, while the air outside seems to ask for nothing at all. In Emily's household, books, writing, domestic labour, and family concerns filled the hours. Beyond the threshold, the moor imposed a different rhythm. It asked for attention to footing, temperature, wind, and distance, rather than explanations. Emily lived at Haworth Parsonage, the family home beside the church, where her father, Patrick Brontë, served as perpetual curate from 1820 until his death in 1861. From there, she faced the open moors and later returned to the close life of the house. The parsonage was not separate from the village, yet its position placed the family close to the churchyard and within reach of broad, exposed country. Inside were duties, voices, and strong family ties. Emily shared the household with her sisters Charlotte and Anne, her brother Branwell, and their father, while the family's routines were shaped by illness, work, and the demands of parish life. Outside was the untamed land of Yorkshire, where no wall pressed close, and no one needed an answer from her at once. The contrast gave solitude a physical boundary, so her solitude was not simply an empty space. It could be a choice to give close care to the land and to her own mind. A solitary walk required no audience and produced no formal result, yet it made room for observation. The same paths could reveal different textures under rain, frost, summer light, or the low grey weather common to the Pennine landscape. There, she did not have to explain each thought. She could listen without turning every feeling into words, allowing sensation to remain sensation for a while. The moor did not ask whether grief was reasonable or whether fear had a clear cause. It offered wind, stone, heath, and silence. Those elements could receive attention without answering back, and that lack of demand was part of their power. Walking gave this quiet a shape. Her body crossed rough ground, her eyes met open distance, and the same small thoughts had less power to circle inside her. Repeated movement linked one moment to the next. Step, breath, slope, pause, and step again. The physical sequence mattered because attention was no longer trapped in a single room or fixed on a single troubling idea. The walk did not erase sorrow. It changed the space around sorrow so that pain no longer filled the whole world. A private loss could remain real while the horizon extended beyond it, and fatigue could soften the sharpest edge of thought. This was not escape in the sense of forgetting. It was a temporary enlargement, placing suffering within a wider field of weather, earth, and time. We cannot know all that Emily felt during those walks. No diary records every route, hour, or private thought, and the surviving evidence is fragmentary. But her poems let us sense a mind reaching toward a peace that was strong, watchful, and not easy to name. In works such as Spellbound and Remembrance, nature is not merely decoration, it becomes bound to endurance, separation, memory, and the desire for release. Perhaps the moors gave her a place where feeling could grow quiet without being pushed away. Perhaps the land held what people could not always hold: grief without explanation, anger without immediate consequence, and longing without a required response. The possibility matters because stillness is not the same as emotional absence. It can be the condition that allows difficult feeling to remain present without becoming overwhelming. The Yorkshire moors were raw and open. They were shaped by exposure, drainage, grazing, and weather, rather than by gardens designed for comfort. Around Haworth, the terrain belonged to the broader Pennine uplands, where peat, heather, stone, and sudden changes in weather made the country demanding. The landscape did not flatter its visitor. It offered no promise that beauty would arrive in a gentle or convenient form. Their grass could be rough, their wind could be cold, and their wide paths could feel lonely. Yet that plain truth could comfort a person tired of pretending to be fine. Nothing on the moor needed to appear cheerful. A dark cloud could remain dark, and a harsh gust could remain harsh. The landscape's honesty allowed difficult moods to exist without requiring immediate correction. The rough ground called for careful steps. The wind filled the empty space, while the far view kept one worry from becoming the whole world. Attention moved outward through the senses and then returned inward with less force. A person still carried the same history back toward Haworth, but the mind had passed through a larger pattern of movement, resistance, and change. In this way, nature may have steadied Emily's attention. It did not cure her pain, and it could not protect her from illness, bereavement, or the limits of her time. But it gave her a quiet place in which that pain could be felt without taking all the air. The stillness came from contact with something larger than private thought. Not an answer, but enough space to keep thinking and feeling. The world around Emily Brontë was quiet in a way that is difficult to find now. At Haworth, in West Yorkshire, there were no electric wires, traffic signals, or screens filling the hours. Beyond the parsonage, wind moved through grasses and heather, while church bells and household sounds marked the day. That quiet gave the mind something modern life often removes, an interval without constant demands. Emily's need for quiet was not the same as ours. Her days included cooking, cleaning, reading, writing, family illness, and the grief that followed repeated deaths in the Brontë household. Her life was limited by place, money, gender, and health. Yet the shared need remains simple. Now and then the mind needs enough room to hear one clear thought before another demand takes its place. The moors did not enter Emily's poems as plain notes from a walk. They offered physical details she knew intimately: rough grass underfoot, stones darkened by rain, cold wind against the face, and a sky stretching over open ground. In the Pennine landscape around Haworth, weather could change quickly, and the land could look severe even in daylight. Emily's inner life gave those details a deeper weight. That is why nature in her work can feel both real and more than real. A hill remains a hill, shaped by rock, soil, and weather, while also carrying loss, hope, fear, or joy. In poems such as The Night Wind, the natural world does not behave like a silent background. It seems to answer human feeling, even when no clear explanation is offered. The outer world and the hidden world meet without either one fully controlling the meaning. Stillness was not surrender for Emily. Stepping away from noise did not make strong feelings disappear, and it did not turn grief into comfort. Instead, quiet gave those feelings space to exist without immediately becoming panic or action. A person could feel anger, longing, or dread, and observe it for a moment. The emotion remained powerful, but it no longer occupied every corner of thought. A quiet mind can hold pain without allowing pain to rule every moment. In that space, anger may become reflection, and sorrow may become a poem with shape and rhythm. Emily's writing shows that calm was not an empty condition stripped of feeling. It was a place where feeling could remain intense while becoming more precise, more durable, and easier to carry. At Haworth Parsonage, life was close in every sense. Emily lived with her father, Patrick Brontë, her sisters Charlotte and Anne, and, until 1848, the demands of a household tied to the parish church. Rooms had practical purposes, work had to be completed, and private thought existed beside the needs of other people. The house held affection, duty, silence, illness, and the pressure of constant nearness. No invented tale is needed to understand why the moors mattered. A home can be loving and still feel full, especially when several people share a small space and sorrow has visited the family repeatedly. The parsonage stood beside St. Michael and All Angels Church, surrounded by village life and narrow boundaries. When those walls seemed to press close, open land offered the mind a wider breath. The movement from the parsonage toward the moors was more than a change of address. Inside, the mind met walls, chores, books, family concerns, and the sense of what had to be done next. Outside, it met distance, weather, uneven ground, and a horizon that did not ask for an explanation. The landscape imposed no household task and demanded no immediate answer. That crossing could change how a person felt. The limits had not vanished, and the family's losses still waited at home, but they no longer filled the entire field of attention. A step beyond the door introduced new sounds, temperatures, and distances. Walking through that altered space could loosen thoughts that had been held tightly, allowing memory and imagination to move without being forced into a conclusion. Many people know a smaller version of that need, even far from Yorkshire. It may be a quiet footpath, an empty field, a park before the crowds arrive, or a window opened after a difficult day. Such a place cannot repair illness, restore the dead, or solve a troubled life. But a brief change in surroundings can interrupt mental pressure long enough for a tired heart to endure the next hour. Emily's bond with nature points to this modest truth. Relief does not always arrive as a grand transformation, and it rarely erases the conditions that cause distress. Sometimes it appears as a few calm minutes in which the mind is not forced to carry every memory, duty, and fear at once. The burden remains real, but attention becomes less crowded, and that small change can matter. Solitude, for Emily, was not simply doing nothing. It could mean noticing how wind moved across the high ground, how rain altered the colour of stone, how the shape of the land disappeared into mist, or how the sky changed before evening. These details required no elaborate theory. They asked only for sustained attention to the physical world and to the feeling of standing inside something much larger than one room. This kind of attention takes part in the quiet. The body walks, the eyes register what is present, and the mind follows instead of forcing every thought back to the same wound. Gradually, thought may stop circling one small fear and begin to move with the wider world. A gust, a slope, or a break in the clouds can become an anchor, bringing awareness back from memory into the immediate moment. Nature may also have seemed like a doorway to something beyond human control. Emily's poems can make the land feel like more than stone, grass, and weather, without pretending that nature is gentle. Storms remain dangerous, winter remains cold, and death remains final. Yet the moors suggest a freedom no person can fully own, because the wind, sky, and seasons continue beyond individual wishes. We cannot say exactly what Emily believed in every hour. Her Christian upbringing, her encounters with death, her doubts, and her love of wild places were connected in ways that surviving documents cannot completely reveal. The poems preserve intensity, but they do not provide a private diary of every belief. That uncertainty is part of the evidence. The mystery should be respected rather than filled with confident invention. The wide moors offered Emily an answer to confinement without making her life easy. They did not remove the walls of the parsonage, the duties of the household, the limits placed on Victorian women, or the grief that shaped her family. They showed something narrower and more useful. Those limits were real, but they were not large enough to define the whole mind. Beyond them, attention could still expand. Under the open sky, a person could feel small and free at the same time. The scale of the moors diminished the individual, yet that same vastness made private thought feel capable of travel. Emily's stillness grew from this strange balance. The world held her within weather, landscape, family, and mortality, while also reminding her that thought could reach far beyond the room where it began. On the wide moors above Haworth, fear could still wound a person, but it did not have to fill the whole world. The open ground, changing weather, and long views gave Emily more room to breathe than the narrow routines of the parsonage allowed. A painful thought remained present, yet the land kept it from becoming the only reality. A painful thought stayed real, and Emily did not need to disguise it or force it away. In her poems, the hills, wind, and sky helped contain powerful feelings without denying them. Nature became a kind of emotional boundary, holding grief, anger, longing, and love, so that none of them had to rule every part of life. That kind of quiet can look weak from the outside, especially in a culture that often measures strength by action, argument, or public confidence. Stillness makes no loud show and asks for no applause. It can pass unnoticed beside dramatic gestures, even when a silent mind is doing the difficult work of remaining present with pain. But stillness may be where strength gathers. In that calm place, a person can find the power to name fear, loss, and hope without being swallowed by them. The calm is not an empty gap between important events. It is a ground beneath the mind, a place where the heart can stand before it decides how to move. No Coward Soul Is Mine gives one of the clearest records of Emily's inner strength. Written near the end of her life, the poem presents a soul that refuses the labels timid, defeated, or spiritually powerless. Its opening declaration is not a boast of physical victory. It is a firm rejection of fear as the deepest truth about the self. Its power reaches toward the world around her. The poem speaks of a spirit that seems wider than the body, and that expansive feeling recalls the open land Emily knew around Haworth. The language does not prove every detail of her private belief, but it does reveal a mind unwilling to bow before terror, mortality, or the judgments of other people. The courage in the poem is not a loud victory. There is no crowd gathered to witness it, no prize placed in Emily's hands, and no public ceremony declaring her triumphant. Its force comes from inward recognition. A person can endure a private struggle without receiving evidence that anyone else has noticed, understood, or approved of the endurance. It is the courage of someone who has suffered in silence and still finds one true thought to hold. Emily's strength feels deep because it does not depend on being displayed. It lives in the decision not to let fear become the final judge of experience. The mind may feel pain fully while refusing to surrender its authority to pain. The poem also moves beyond the small rules of success and failure. Human praise can change from one day to the next, and human judgment can be harsh, incomplete, or simply wrong. A reputation may rise through admiration and fall through rumour. Against those unstable measures, Emily places a standard that cannot be settled by public opinion alone. Emily's spiritual life is not placed in the hands of those changing opinions. Nature helps this feeling grow. The open sky, the long hills, and the steady earth suggest a scale far larger than one person's loss or one person's name. Their presence does not erase suffering, but it places suffering within a world that continues beyond human approval. Still, we cannot turn Emily's faith into a simple lesson with one certain meaning. Her private thoughts remain partly hidden from us, and the poems are shaped works of language rather than direct transcripts of every belief she held. Letters, family memories, and surviving poems offer evidence, but none gives complete access to the inward life behind them. What did that faith mean to her? Perhaps it was a way to face the world without needing the world to approve of her. Perhaps it was trust in something deeper than praise, blame, gain, or defeat. It may have joined Christian belief with a fierce awareness of nature and mortality. The final answer may have belonged to Emily alone. The Moors did not save her through magic. They did not speak for her, cure illness, settle family grief, or remove the hard parts of life. Emily still faced isolation, bereavement, physical decline, and the demands of daily responsibility. The landscape offered no supernatural rescue. Its value lay in what it made possible within her attention, not in any power that replaced human action. They were more like a silent witness, present without judgment or demand. The open land gave her courage, a setting large enough to be felt, from the rough ground near the parsonage to the changing horizon beyond it. Emily did not ask nature to make her brave. She carried her courage into that wide space where its shape could become clearer. The Old Stoic offers another path into Emily's stillness. Its title points towards self-control and the strength to endure, ideas associated with ancient Stoic thought. Yet the poem is not a cold exercise in suppressing emotion. It gives form to a person trying to protect the inner self while facing forces that cannot be controlled, predicted, or negotiated away. The poem does not promise an easy life. Instead, it shapes a mind determined to meet pain without being broken by it. Feeling may rise like a hard wind, threatening to scatter judgment and purpose, but the self does not have to be carried away. Endurance here is active. It requires attention, restraint, and repeated refusal to surrender the center of one's being. Many people know the fear of losing control. Illness can alter a household, death can change a future, and a sudden event can make careful plans useless within hours. Life may move faster than the mind can follow. Emily's poems recognize that vulnerability without pretending that discipline can prevent every loss or provide an explanation for every wound. Emily's calm does not promise safety or clear answers. It offers a way to stand inside doubt with fewer demands placed on reality. Some things cannot be held back, and some storms cannot be made still. Yet a person may still choose how to meet them, how to name them, and whether fear will govern the final response. In the old Stoic, strong feeling does not vanish when the poem begins. It rises into view, carrying fear, grief, desire, and the pressure of mortality. Then the mind meets it and makes a choice. It will not be dragged wherever panic, sorrow, or want may lead. Feeling remains powerful, but it no longer commands every movement. That choice resembles the quiet endurance of the moors around Haworth. Wind can bend the grass, rain can darken the ground, and clouds can cover the sun for hours. Yet the land remains where it is. Its calm is not the end of weather or change. It is the strength to stay rooted while change passes over everything. Emily's stillness should never be mistaken for a lack of feeling. A quiet face can contain fear, longing, religious doubt, affection, and pain that no companion can fully see. The Brontë household knew illness, bereavement, work, and isolation. Silence in that setting could conceal an active inner life rather than prove that nothing was happening. The force in poems such as the Old Stoic and No Coward Soul Is Mine comes from this hidden depth. Their measured language does not suggest that life was easy for Emily Brontë, who died in 1848 at the age of 30. The poems show a mind trying to stand firm while powerful emotions press inward, demanding an answer. The moors and Emily's inner life seem to meet in a strange, forceful way. The land near Haworth was rough, open, elevated, and difficult to tame, shaped by peat, stone, wind, and sudden rain. Her thoughts also resisted neat boundaries. They did not settle comfortably into simple answers about love, death, God, or the self. This does not mean Emily was literally the same as the land beneath her feet. It means that the place gave her feelings a fitting home in language and imagination. On ground that made no promise of softness or certainty, her own unruly thoughts could exist without being pressed into polite shapes or convenient conclusions. Open land can change the way a mind feels. With fewer walls, trees, and houses close at hand, the eyes can travel farther before meeting an obstruction. A person walking beyond the village could register distance, weather, and shifting light instead of remaining fixed on rooms, duties, and nearby faces. That physical space could create mental space. A wide view may make the mind feel less shut in, even when its problems remain. A little room can grow inside a person. In that room, thought and prayer can rise without immediate interruption, and strong feeling can slowly take the shape of a poem. The emotion is not reduced. It becomes more ordered, more exact, and easier to recognize. Rest, in Emily's world, did not have to mean happiness, comfort, or the disappearance of pain. It could mean standing in a hard place and no longer fighting every thought that arrived. The mind might still remember loss or fear the future, yet cease resisting its own movement long enough to observe what the feeling was asking. A quiet walk, a pause beside open ground, or the simple act of noticing wind and cloud could give the mind a small interval of relief. Nothing had to be solved at once. For a tired person facing household work, illness, or grief, that interval might last only minutes, but minutes of reduced pressure could be enough to begin again. Nature did not erase the parsonage, domestic labour, or the ties of family. Emily remained connected to the household at Haworth and to the practical demands of 19th century life. The moors offered something more limited and more useful, a way to return to herself before returning to those obligations, with her attention gathered rather than scattered. Escape runs away from life and asks life to wait somewhere behind. A healing walk is different. It sends a person back toward responsibility, with clearer sight, steadier breathing, and a little more strength for what still must be done. The house remains, the work remains, and the grief may remain, but the person facing them has changed position. But did the moors heal Emily, or did they simply hold her while the pain stayed? No landscape can promise to remove grief, fear, illness, or doubt. The ground may receive a person's attention without answering any question. Its value may lie not in curing suffering, but in giving suffering enough space to be endured without immediate collapse. Her poems suggest comfort, and they also keep their wounds open. The language reaches toward permanence, yet remains aware of death and uncertainty. That tension makes the stillness feel true. It does not pretend that one view, one walk, or one calm thought can repair a human life shaped by loss, responsibility, and the limits of time. To look inward can be a shelter, but it can also become a weight. Emily's deep attention helped her turn private experience into poems of unusual force, yet a mind that feels intensely may struggle to leave its own questions behind. Reflection can clarify fear, but it can also make fear more detailed, more persistent, and harder to dismiss. Her inner life deserves care, not easy praise. The same silence that gave her room to think could also leave her alone with questions that had no simple ending. Solitude might protect concentration and strengthen imagination, while also narrowing the circle of comfort around her. Stillness, then, carried two consequences at once: freedom for thought and exposure to isolation. A private feeling begins in stillness. Emily could notice it, test it against the steady presence of the land, and give it a clear shape in words. The movement mattered. An emotion that began as confusion could become an image, a rhythm, or a sentence with deliberate force. Writing did not erase the feeling, it made its structure visible. Once shaped, that feeling no longer belonged only to her. A reader could enter the poem and find fear beside courage, sorrow beside peace, or doubt beside a stubborn form of faith. The private stillness became a bridge between one quiet mind and another. Emily's connection to nature gave that bridge its foundation, allowing solitude to become shared human experience. Sometimes a poem feels like a small room with a light left on. Emily Bronte's words can create that feeling through a few plain, exact images. A soul under pressure, a landscape that outlasts one human hour, and a voice refusing to disappear. One line may meet a fear that had no name and sit beside it without trying to push it away. That comfort does not come from a neat answer. Her poems do not promise that pain will soon end or that grief will be rewarded with an explanation. They offer something quieter and more durable, the sense that another mind has stood in the same dark place, recognized its weight, and remained present instead of turning away. Nature teaches this same kind of truth. The sky can change while a person is still walking across the fields near Haworth. Rain can darken wool and slow the feet. Hard ground can resist each step, while a distant ridge remains distant no matter how strongly someone wishes to reach it. The world keeps its own measure. These limits are not cruel. They bring the mind back to what is real and measurable: wind against the face, cold in the hands, stone beneath the boots, and long miles that cannot be rushed. Emily's calm grows not from ruling the land, but from meeting it as it is, without asking weather or distance to obey her. Her quiet life held many demands. At the Haworth parsonage, family duty, church life, domestic work, illness, loss, and the eyes of a tightly connected community could press close. Her father served as a clergyman, and the household depended on regular labour. Yet she kept a part of herself that those pressures could not fully claim. That choice did not need a loud fight or a public declaration. It could happen during a walk across the moors, inside a thought held through an ordinary chore, or on a page written when the house had grown still. The open land gave her refusal a living place, wide enough for her spirit to breathe beyond the walls of duty. No coward soul is mine carries that strength with unusual directness. Written in the 1840s, the poem's voice is firm, but firmness does not mean fear was never there. Courage matters because the heart understands what fear, death, and sorrow can do, and still chooses not to bow completely to their power. The poem does not show a person untouched by sorrow. Emily knew bereavement, physical weakness, and the gradual disappearance of people she loved. It shows instead a person facing sorrow without allowing it to become the whole self. Strength appears as a choice made beside pain, not after pain has vanished or been neatly explained. In the poem, the wide land becomes more than a place on a map of Yorkshire. Open fields, high ground, and the far reach of the horizon help Emily speak about the soul without reducing it to a private feeling. The size of the world makes one grief real, but not large enough to contain every part of life. This is not a sermon delivered by the landscape. The land does not force one lesson on the heart, and the hills do not guarantee that suffering will lead to wisdom. They give the mind room to consider that a soul may hold sorrow, wonder, loss, and hope at the same time, without resolving them into one simple answer. Where did Emily's sure voice come from? It may have grown from Christian faith, from her intense attention to nature, from years spent in close thought, or from the moors she knew through repeated walks near Haworth. Her poems also reveal reading, memory, imagination, and discipline. Perhaps all these parts met in her and strengthened one another. No single answer can explain a human being. That mystery keeps Emily from becoming a simple tale of a poet saved by nature. The land may have shaped her rhythms, images, and sense of scale, but she also brought a sharp mind, a private mythology, and a deep will to the meeting. Nature offered conditions. Emily made meaning from them. For someone living inside a narrow life, a small inner room can still remain. Work may fill the daylight hours. Grief may sit at home in familiar furniture. Family needs may leave little private space, while troubled thoughts follow into the night. Yet inward life does not always disappear merely because outward life has become crowded. Emily's story does not say that every limit can be left behind. Illness, obligation, money, geography, and death could not simply be walked away from in 19th century Haworth. It suggests that one part of the self may still be guarded. A path, a patch of sky, a remembered line, or a quiet thought can help keep that space alive. The old Stoic looks at this act again. Its speaker does not pretend that change is easy, painless, or under human control. The poem turns instead toward the question of inward possession. How can a person meet change, separation, and the passage of time without surrendering the whole self to them? The moors offer a clear image of that work. They remain through bright days, fog, rain, frost, and hard winter weather, while seasons pass over the same ground. They do not stop change, and they cannot protect every living thing from loss. They stand within change, steady enough to reveal that endurance is not the same as escape. Emily's courage also rests in what she does not claim to know. She does not turn the hills into proof that all will be well, or pretend that beauty cancels death. She lets hard truths stay hard. The world can be beautiful and indifferent. Faith can be powerful and troubled, and a human being can continue without covering uncertainty in false comfort. That honesty can feel kinder than forced hope. It respects the heart enough to let it grieve, wait, and wonder without demanding an immediate conclusion. In Emily's Stillness, peace is not the end of every question, nor the removal of every wound. It is the strength to remain beside one question, one sorrow, or one open horizon without turning away. Emily's bond with nature had a quiet rhythm. At the Haworth parsonage, where she lived from 1820 until her death in 1848, the rooms were close, the household was busy, and the village stood high above the surrounding valleys. She could walk beyond those walls onto the Yorkshire moors, where open ground gave her attention somewhere larger to rest. She did not need the moors to give her a quick answer. She could watch cloud shadows cross the grass, follow the line of a dry stone wall, or notice rain gathering on dark stone, then return with a steadier mind and a clearer voice. Repetition mattered. Each familiar path offered a place where thought could settle without being forced. Peace often comes through small acts done again and again. A walk of even a few hundred yards, a pause beside heather, or several minutes away from household noise may seem insignificant, yet the body registers those changes. A tired pulse can slow, breathing can deepen, and attention can move from immediate pressure toward the solid details of ground, weather, and distance. Emily's life does not ask anyone to copy her path. It shows instead that calm need not arrive as one grand rescue. It may come in small pieces, a daily route, a remembered hill, a window open to cold air, or a familiar line of poetry. Over time, those pieces can form enough steadiness for a person to feel less lost inside the day. Stillness begins in more than a thought. A body moves over uneven ground, boots meet mud or stone, breath adjusts to the slope, and the eyes follow the horizon instead of circling every worry. For Emily, the physical world was not a decorative background to inner life. It was part of the process by which inner life became bearable and precise. Then the mind gains space. This simple chain helps explain why Emily's landscapes matter in poems such as Wuthering Heights and Remembrance. Their force is tied to presence, feet on earth, senses awake, and attention directed toward wind, frost, grass, and sky. The calm is not abstract, it is connected to the act of remaining somewhere long enough to notice. Yet much of Emily's quiet life cannot be recovered. The poems remain, the parsonage can still be visited, and the moors can still be named on a map, but no record shows every hour she spent walking alone. The surviving letters and family accounts are limited, and even the Brontë Parsonage Museum cannot restore the private thoughts behind each silence. That gap calls for care. It is better to leave some parts unknown than to fill them with easy guesses drawn from a famous name or a dramatic biography. Behind the silence was a living person shaped by family, illness, work, faith, and weather. Emily was not a puzzle made for later readers to solve completely. The moors also gave Emily room to hold more than one truth. She could love her sisters and still need time alone. She could belong to the routines of the parsonage and still feel drawn beyond its boundaries. She could carry deep Christian faith while confronting doubt, grief, and the limits of human understanding in an unsettled 19th century world. She could seem controlled in her poems while strong feelings moved beneath their measured lines. The land did not force her into one shape. Under a wide sky, affection and distance, faith and uncertainty, tenderness and anger could exist together. This mattered because nature was not asking her to choose a single identity before she was allowed to feel at home. Quiet can protect honest feeling. When the noise of other people fades, a person may notice what is present before fear, duty, politeness, or praise changes its shape. That does not make every private impression true, but it creates a better chance of examining it. Solitude can become a space where emotion is observed rather than immediately defended or concealed. Nature did not tell Emily what to think. It gave her enough silence to hear what she already carried. In that space, pain could remain pain, and hope could remain hope, without being dressed in false words. The moors offered no easy moral lesson, no promise that storms would pass on schedule, and no assurance that loss could be undone. No one has to perform strength every minute. A quiet person is not failing to take part in life, and a retreat from conversation is not automatically rejection. At times, stepping back is how a person keeps a true part of the self alive. For Emily, distance from noise could preserve attention, honesty, and the ability to return without pretending that nothing had happened. Emily's solitude points to that small right. Rest is not always escape, and silence is not always weakness. Sometimes they are the ways a tired spirit stays whole. In a household marked by writing, teaching, domestic work, and repeated encounters with illness, a period of separation could protect the inner resources needed to continue thinking, creating, and caring. The moors were wild because they were not arranged around human wishes. Wind changed them without permission, rain darkened the turf, frost hardened the paths, and the ground kept its own uneven shape. Even near Haworth, where roads, walls and fields showed human labour, the weather remained stronger than any plan. Nature resisted being made comfortable or predictable. By meeting such a place, Emily could learn respect for what no one can control. That lesson can grow into moral courage, the strength to face hard truth without bending it into a softer lie. A storm was not cruel because it disrupted a walk, and a winter field did not apologize for being bleak. Reality remained real whether or not it offered comfort. This courage did not need a loud win. It lived in the choice to remain near what was real, even when the answer was not kind or clear. The poems do not always resolve their tensions, and the moors do not explain themselves. Their value lies partly in that refusal. They make room for endurance without pretending endurance has erased suffering. So Emily's stillness was not proof that life had left her untouched. It was proof that pressure had reached her, stayed with her, and been given a shape she could carry. The open land did not remove grief, duty, illness, or uncertainty. It helped her meet those forces with attention, allowing silence, weather, and language to hold what could not be made simple. A peaceful poem may sound as if it arrived effortlessly, but calm language often conceals long preparation. It can grow from repeated walks, hours of close thought, painful memories, and feelings that resist quick repair. For Emily Brontë, writing at Haworth in the 1840s meant shaping private unrest into measured lines, where each image of earth or sky carried emotional weight. Emily Bronte's stillness was not simply sitting in silence. It was the work of remaining near fear, loss, and doubt until they could take form in language. The quiet had been earned through attention. A difficult feeling was not pushed away. It was watched, tested, and given a place within the poem. A reader may feel this labour without knowing every event behind it. The poem offers no sudden cure and no tidy explanation of suffering. Instead, it creates a steady place where a troubled mind can rest temporarily. Its rhythm, its natural images, and its refusal to exaggerate can make inner turmoil feel containable. First, the reader arrives with noise, unfinished tasks, bodily fatigue, remembered words, and worries about what may happen next. Then the poem offers a calm voice. Images of wind, earth, sky, and spirit draw attention outward, beyond the narrow circle of private thought. The worry remains, but it no longer fills the whole world. This is how a few lines can become an anchor. They do not pull the reader away from ordinary life or pretend that grief has disappeared. They help the reader stand inside experience without being swept away by every passing thought. Nature becomes a point of contact, joining the mind to something broader and more enduring. For a tired person, this kind of company can feel rare. There is no demand to hurry, improve, confess, or explain the pain immediately. Emily's poems leave room for a mind that has reached its limit for one day. That permission matters because exhaustion often makes even ordinary decisions feel heavier than they should. They do not ask for a bright smile before rest is allowed. They can sit beside sadness without making sadness the whole truth. In that space, strength becomes less like a loud performance and more like the choice to remain present. Continuing to breathe, notice, and endure can itself become a quiet form of courage. Stillness is made by three things meeting. There is Emily's inward attention, the rough land around Haworth, and the reader's choice to slow down long enough to notice. The arrangement matters. Without attention, the landscape is only weathered ground. Without landscape, private feeling may lose the spaciousness that lets it change. The moors alone do not make the calm. A poem alone does not make it either. Meaning comes when a human mind meets a place, then meets words that grew from an encounter with that place. Bronte's landscape was not a decorative background added after the thought. It helped organise the thought itself. The land gave Emily more than a pretty view. The exposed ground, sudden weather, peat paths, stone walls and wide sky offered a scale larger than the small rooms of daily life. At Haworth Parsonage, where family life and work were closely shared, Her imagination could move across that open space without needing to hide. It is tender to wonder whether Emily knew her quiet might last beyond her own life. Her poems were published in 1846 under the shared name Ellis Bell, and their future importance could not have been measured then. Could she have guessed that her private struggle with fear and freedom would eventually reach other tired minds? There is no sure answer. We cannot place a wish in her heart that surviving letters and records do not preserve, yet the mystery makes the gift feel more human. The poems were made without any promise that strangers would read them, depend on them, or recognize their own loneliness inside lines written in a Yorkshire parsonage. In No Coward Soul Is Mine, the central force is a refusal to call the soul weak or afraid. Written near the end of Emily's life and published after her death in 1848, the poem does not erase darkness. It stands beside a person within darkness and insists that fear is not the final measure of identity. For someone facing a fear that cannot be shared, that feeling can resemble a hand resting close by. It does not claim to end the night, solve illness, or restore what has been lost. It simply suggests that fear does not own the whole self. Inner life can contain terror and resistance at the same time. The old Stoic offers a different kind of shelter. Its lines do not promise that life can be held in perfect control, and they do not make suffering disappear through optimism. Instead, the poem considers endurance, personal limits, and the hard boundary between what a person can change and what must ultimately be faced. That thought can quiet the mind, because peace does not have to wait until life becomes clear and safe. Bronte's language allows uncertainty to remain visible without giving it unlimited power. A person may begin to rest while questions about death, love, duty, and the future are still open. Emily's Way also leaves room for duty. A person can love family, keep up with work, attend to illness, and care for daily needs while still requiring time alone. At Haworth, solitude was not an abstract luxury. It had to exist within household routines, shared responsibilities, and the practical demands of 19th century life. Walking toward nature is not always a rejection of other people. It can be a way to return with more care after the mind has had space to breathe. Solitude may protect a true part of the self, allowing it to recover from noise and pressure before coming back to shared life with steadier attention. Emily's stillness did not make her a finished, peaceful figure. She still carried sharp physical pain, deep Christian faith, and questions that offered no clear ending. Her life at Haworth included illness, family deaths, household labour, and the constant pressure of a small community. Quiet for her was not the absence of struggle, but a way of remaining present inside it. That is part of what makes her easy to love. She did not rise above ordinary life and leave it behind. She stayed within its hurt, its duties, and its uncertainty, then kept seeking a way to live with what she could not solve. Her poems do not promise that suffering will disappear. They show a mind continuing to ask what endurance might mean. A quiet person may look simple from the outside, yet silence can hold faith, fear, longing, anger, and strength all at once. In Emily's case, the quiet life recorded at the Haworth parsonage concealed an intense inner world, one shaped by reading, weather, memory, family loss, and the stern beauty of the Yorkshire landscape. Emily reminds us to leave room for lives we cannot fully read. A closed door may hide not emptiness, but a whole world still taking shape. The surviving facts are limited. She was born in 1818, lived most of her life in Haworth, and published only one novel during her lifetime. Those facts cannot contain the mind behind them. The moors gave her space away from narrow rules and close walls. Solitude helped her notice each change in her mind, while her poems gave those feelings a shape through recurring images of wind, stone, birds, frost, and open ground. Walking beyond the village did not remove responsibility, but it created distance from the rooms where duty and grief pressed most closely. Her spiritual words gave that shape a longer life. What began as a private struggle could reach another person many years later, carrying a calm that did not depend on easy answers. Poems such as Remembrance and No Coward Soul Is Mine remain powerful because they hold belief beside doubt, grief beside devotion, and longing beside the possibility of release. A personal place of rest does not need to look like Emily's moors. It may be a path, a tree, a field, a quiet room, or a small patch of sky seen from a window. The important feature is not grandeur, it is repetition and familiarity. The way one known place can become a steady point while everything inside a person keeps changing. The place matters because it lets the mind slow down. In that small pause, a person may hear what noise had covered without needing to copy Emily or live as she did. A few minutes beside a familiar hedge, under a tree, or near an open window can separate immediate reaction from considered thought, making space for feelings to become understandable. For Emily, stillness helped guard an inner self from being swallowed by pressure. Nature did not make her life free of pain. She experienced the deaths of her mother and siblings, managed demanding domestic work, and lived with the restrictions placed on women in the 19th century. The landscape gave her room to stay fully human while those pressures were still present. That may be the deepest gift of quiet. It does not erase the wound. It keeps the wound from becoming the whole person. Grief can remain part of a life without becoming its only name. Fear can be acknowledged without directing every choice. Emily's writing repeatedly preserves that distinction, allowing suffering to speak while refusing to let suffering speak alone. In her poems, the journey often begins with a strong voice. The speaker may sound defiant, wounded, or unwilling to accept another person's judgment. Then the world of wind, stone, grass, and sky opens a wider space for feeling. Physical surroundings do not replace emotion. They give emotion scale, movement, and a language larger than private distress. From there, spiritual thought reaches past fear. At the end, the listener may notice a softer kind of strength growing inside, one that does not need to make a sound. This strength is not triumph in the ordinary sense. It resembles endurance, the ability to remain truthful when certainty is unavailable, and to continue without demanding that the universe explain itself. But the Moors could never explain every loss. They could not promise faith, stop the mind from suffering again, or turn death into something easy to bear. Emily lost people she loved, including her brother Branwell in 1848, and she herself died later that year, at only 30. No landscape, however beautiful, could cancel those facts. Their gift was smaller and more real. They made room for a person to face the unknown without being pressed to solve it at once. A walk could not produce a final answer about death, providence, or human loneliness. It could offer distance, air, and time, allowing an unanswered question to remain open without immediately becoming unbearable. Emily's poems later carried that quiet beyond Haworth. In 1846, Emily, Charlotte, and Anne Brontë joined their poems in one book, using the names Currer, Ellis, and Acton Bell. The volume was titled Poems by Currer, Ellis, and Acton Bell, and its small first edition sold slowly. Yet the publication created a lasting record of Emily's voice beyond the parsonage. That book gave Emily's private voice a public life. It also helped shape the lasting place of women's writing in English letters, even though the world first saw the work through names that hid who the authors were. The pseudonyms protected the sisters from assumptions about female authorship, while also making their identities and the conditions behind the poems harder for readers to see. The people who read Emily after her death found more than a picture of a lonely writer. They found proof that a small place, a hard life, and a private mind could still leave a mark far beyond Yorkshire. Her novel Wuthering Heights, published in 1847, and her poems made Haworth part of literary history without turning its hardships into a simple legend. In 1850, Charlotte brought out a new edition of the poems and named the sisters more openly. She also wrote a biographical notice that helped define how later readers imagined Emily, though that portrait was shaped by Charlotte's own grief and perspective. The record changed, but Emily's stillness remained at its heart, moving from the parsonage at Haworth into the long life of books. In 1848, when Emily Brontë died at Haworth, the stillness she found on the moors did not end with her life. Her 1847 novel, Wuthering Heights, left behind a new sense that nature could hold anger, grief, love, and thought all at once, without reducing any of them to a single meaning. Yet one question remains. Did the moors give Emily her calm, Or did her own mind turn the moors into a place of calm? The records can show where she walked around Haworth, but not what she felt on each path in each season or during each silent return home. Her sisters saw parts of her life, and her poems preserve fragments of her inner world. Charlotte described Emily's strength and reserve, while family memories placed her within the parsonage and its tightly connected household. Still, no page can tell us how much peace she truly found, or how much pain stayed hidden beneath it. The lasting result can be found in the book itself. Wuthering Heights is still read because its hills and storms do not sit behind the human story. They move with it, as if the land could feel every wound. Weather becomes pressure, distance becomes separation, and the landscape seems to remember what people cannot escape. The name Ellis Bell also shaped that result. In 1847, Emily's work reached the public through a pen name shared in spirit with the names Currer and Acton Bell used by her sisters. Readers met the wild world of the novel before they knew the quiet woman who had made it. For many readers, that world became a safe place for hard feelings. The moors did not erase grief, but they gave grief a shape, a sound, and room to breathe. Through Heathcliff, Catherine, and the isolated houses, emotions that might seem impossible in ordinary life could be confronted without being softened. That gift passed through schools, homes, and libraries. A person who could not name a loss might still find it in the dark hills, the hard wind, or the wide space around a lonely house. The novel offered no simple cure, but it gave private suffering a language large enough to contain it. Emily's work also changed an old idea about gentle nature. The land in her writing is not only soft grass and clear sky, it can be rough, cold, and fierce, yet still offer a kind of truth. Its value does not depend on comfort. Sometimes the harsh landscape is more honest, because it refuses to pretend that life is easy. This is why the Yorkshire moors matter more than a simple picture of the outdoors. They are tied to Haworth, to Emily's short life, and to the close world where her thoughts took form. The parsonage, the churchyard, the surrounding paths, and the open upland created a physical setting that entered both biography and literature. The record still cannot settle whether Emily meant nature to stand for the soul, or whether readers later placed that meaning there. Her poems give signs, including repeated attention to wind, seasons, death, and endurance, but they do not give a full answer. Their uncertainty is evidence of distance, not proof of indifference. That open space is part of their power. The poems remain still because they do not force every feeling into a clear end. A line can hold longing without resolving it, and a natural image can remain both physical and emotional. The silence around the poems allows each reader to complete part of the experience. Their long reach is plain in the way people speak of the Brontes today. Haworth is not known only as a village where a family lived. It is also known as the home of books that made weather and land part of human thought. The Brontë Parsonage Museum now preserves manuscripts, possessions, and records that connect the literary legacy to that place. The moors became part of that public memory. They drew the world toward a small place in Yorkshire, where a path, a wall, or a stretch of heather could remind people that quiet does not mean empty. The landscape became associated with concentration, solitude, and the difficult freedom that Emily's writing gave to readers. That memory has a human cost as well as a gift. Visitors may seek the peace they link with Emily, but the real Emily cannot be brought back by walking the same ground. Tourism can preserve a place and simplify it at the same time, turning a complicated life into a reassuring legend of solitude and inspiration. The land can offer space, but it cannot promise healing. It can hold a tired mind for a while, then send that mind back into the same life, with the same fears waiting at home. Emily's own story makes that limit clear. Proximity to nature did not protect her from illness, loss, family pressure, or death at the age of 30. Even so, the moors remain part of the lasting record. Above Haworth, the wind still moves through the heather, and Emily's quiet strength still seems to rest there. Not because the landscape can speak for her, but because her poems and novel taught generations of readers to listen differently to silence, weather, and the mind within them.